A man walked up to my desk one day with tears in his eyes and said, "I'm so sorry. I don't want to be doing this." Then opened his shirt to reveal a bomb strapped to his chest. I pressed the silent alarm under me while staring at the digital timer showing 47:23 and counting down. "Please, just hand over the money," he said, looking at me like he was silently pleading for help. His voice was so broken that I actually looked at his face instead of the bomb. 40-something pizza delivery uniform, already soaked with sweat even though it was freezing outside. I started pulling cash from my drawer with shaking hands while he stood there crying. Not the aggressive posture of a bank robber, but hunched and terrified, looking at the timer like he was held captive by something. My engagement ring caught on the bills and I thought about my fiancé, about the wedding in 3 months that I might not live to see. "All the drawers," he whispered. "They said all the drawers." My coworker Chloe was frozen at her station next to mine, and I had to say her name 3 times before she started emptying her drawer too. Her hands were shaking so badly she kept dropping bills, and I wanted to tell her it was okay, but nothing about this was okay. We'd practiced robbery drills, but never this. Never a human bomb who looked as scared as we were. Steve, our manager, approached slowly with his hands visible, using his manager voice, calm and steady, asking the man if we could help, if there was another way. The man shook his head violently. "They're watching. They said if I don't come out with the money, they'll detonate it." His hand went to his neck and I saw ligature marks, fresh ones, like someone had put something around his throat. A collar, maybe, before the vest. Testing his compliance, making sure he'd do what they wanted. "Who?" Steve asked. "Who's doing this?" The man looked at the timer before answering, like he was calculating how much time he could waste on explanations. "I don't know their names. I delivered a pizza to their house. 37 Elm Street, the old Victorian. They said come inside for the tip and then," he gestured at the bomb. "They put this on me in the garage, showed me the remote, made me watch them test one on a mannequin." My stomach turned. This morning he'd probably been worried about normal things like gas prices and making rent, and now he was going to die for $37 of pizza. I handed him stacks of 20s, and his hands shook so badly he dropped them. Bills scattered across the floor and he fell to his knees trying to gather them, sobbing apologies. This wasn't a criminal. This was someone's dad or husband, delivering pizzas for probably $12 an hour, and now he was going to die. "Leave them," I said. "Take what you have." He looked up at me from the floor. "They said all of it. Every drawer, or they'll kill me." The timer showed 32 minutes. 32 minutes that he'd spend walking around knowing he was going to die. Maria from window 4 brought her cash over, then Tom from window 5. Everyone moving in slow motion, trying not to look at the bomb but unable to look away. The man stayed on his knees, shoving money into a delivery bag that still smelled like pepperoni. "What's your name?" I asked. "Paul," he said. "Paul Torres. I have 2 kids, 13 and 10, the same ages as my nephews." I pictured them waiting for their dad to come home from work, not knowing he was here, wearing death strapped to his chest. Steve was on the phone with someone, probably the police, speaking in code. Paul noticed and started shaking harder. "They'll see the cops," he said. "They'll detonate it if they see cops." "How far away are they?" I asked. "I don't know. They just gave me an address and said I have 1 hour total." He looked at the timer. 29 minutes. "They told me to get the money and drive to them. It would take 21 minutes to get there, wherever there was." I watched him struggle to zip the bag with shaking fingers and realized whoever had done this had no intention of letting him live. They'd get their money and probably detonate the bomb anyway. No witnesses. "My kids," Paul said suddenly, looking at me. "Can you tell them I'm sorry? That I didn't want to do this?" "You're going to tell them yourself," I told him. He shook his head. "They're not going to get me live. I saw their faces. I could identify them and they know it. It's over. They were laughing when they put this on me. Laughing." The timer hit 27. Paul stood up with the bag, turned toward the door, then stopped. He looked back at all of us, these strangers he might take with him when the bomb went off. "I'm supposed to walk out alone," he said. "If anyone follows, they'll detonate." Steve said, "Paul, wait, maybe we can—" "There's no maybe," Paul said. "I deliver pizzas. I was just doing my job. Tell my kids I was just doing my job." He walked toward the door, the timer at 25, carrying maybe $40,000 that wouldn't save him. I couldn't stand frozen, and at that moment, I decided to act. I watched Paul turn toward the door with that bag of money and the timer ticking down to 25 minutes, and something in me refuses to let him walk out alone to die. Before I can second-guess myself, I grab the GPS tracker we keep for large cash transfers and slip it into the top stack of bills along with the die pack, my hands moving on pure instinct while my brain screams that this is crazy. The tracker is small, about the size of a quarter, and it slides between 2 20s without making the stack look any different. Paul doesn't notice because he's too busy trying to zip the bag with shaking fingers, and I don't let myself think about what happens if the people watching him find it before the police can help. The die pack goes in next, buried deeper in the stack where it won't go off until someone tries to spend the bills. My engagement ring catches on the edge of the bag as I push the last stack in, and for a second I think about Wilder. about how he's going to feel if this goes wrong and I don't come home tonight. But Paul has kids waiting for him too, and I can't just stand here and do nothing while he walks to his death. I catch Steve's eye and mouth, "I'm going," while pointing at the door, and he barely has time to shake his head before I'm already moving. His face goes pale, but he gives me the smallest nod, understanding that someone needs to try something because doing nothing means Paul dies for sure. Chloe grabs my arm as I pass her station, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. I pull free gently and she lets go, her eyes wide and wet with tears she's trying not to cry. Maria and Tom are both frozen at their windows, watching Paul shuffle toward the exit with the bag clutched against his chest, like it might protect him from what's coming. The timer on the bomb is still visible under his shirt, the numbers glowing red through the fabric, and I force myself not to stare at it as I follow him. Paul pushes through the door and I memorize everything I can. His Honda is old, maybe 15 years, with a dented back bumper and a missing hubcap on the driver's side. The plate number is partially visible, and I repeat it in my head over and over so I won't forget. He turns right onto Main Street, and I watch which direction he's heading, east toward the older part of town where the houses get bigger and the streets get quieter. My engagement ring catches the light as I pull out my phone with shaking hands, and I think about Wilder waiting for me at home, about the wedding in 3 months that I might not live to see if this goes wrong. But I'm already committed now, already moving, and there's no safe way to go back. I step outside against every protocol we've ever been taught and pretend to light a cigarette I don't smoke while dialing 911. The cold air hits my face and I realize I'm sweating despite the temperature, my shirt sticking to my back under my jacket. The dispatcher answers on the second ring, and I'm talking fast, words tumbling over each other about the bomb vest and the tracker, and Paul heading east on Main. She stays calm, asking me to repeat the plate number and confirm my location, and I can hear her typing as I talk. Then she tells me to hold, and I hear the line click as she patches me through to someone who can actually help. The wait feels like forever, but it's probably only 10 seconds before a man's voice comes on, steady and calm in a way that makes me want to cry with relief. Detective Andrew Maher introduces himself and asks me to repeat the tracker information and confirm the die pack serial number. I tell him about Paul's kids, about the ligature marks on his neck, about how the captors are watching and will detonate if they see marked police cars. Maher doesn't waste time questioning why I followed or telling me I shouldn't have. He just starts asking questions, building a picture of what's happening and what resources he needs. His voice stays level the whole time, like this is something he knows how to handle, and that steadiness keeps me from completely falling apart. Maher asks if I can maintain visual contact from a safe distance, because they can't risk marked units being spotted, and I hear myself saying yes, even though my whole body is shaking. He warns me this is dangerous and I'm not trained for this, but there's also respect in his voice because he knows Paul's running out of time and every second counts. I can hear him talking to other people in the background, coordinating, and I realize he's already mobilizing a response while he keeps me on the line. He tells me not to hang up, to stay connected so he can guide me, and I feel less alone knowing someone is there, even if they can't physically be beside me yet. I text Chloe with my free hand, typing one-handed while I watch Paul's car turn at the next light. The message comes out short, and I have to correct 3 typos before I can send it. Her response comes back immediately, and I can feel her fear through the screen. The weight of what we all just lived through hits me harder now that I'm outside, now that the immediate threat isn't right in front of me anymore. This wasn't a drill or a false alarm, this was a man forced to choose between his life and ours, and somehow we all survived the first part. But Paul is still wearing that bomb and the timer is still counting down, and the second part isn't over yet. I run to my car in the employee lot, fumbling with my keys and dropping them once before I get the door open. I get in and pull into traffic 2 cars behind Paul's Honda, my heart hammering so hard I can feel it in my throat. Maher stays on the line through my car's Bluetooth, and his voice fills the space around me, giving me instructions about maintaining distance and watching for possible lookouts. He tells me to stay at least 2 car lengths back and to avoid making it obvious I'm following. Having his voice there makes me feel less alone in this insane decision, like I'm part of something instead of just one person doing something stupid and dangerous. Maher tells me the bomb squad is mobilizing with Kavya Joshi leading the team, and they're considering radio frequency jamming, but worried about triggering a backup detonator. The technical details wash over me, and I don't understand half of what he's saying, but I understand the core message. There might not be a safe way to disarm this thing, and Paul might die even if we do everything right. The thought makes my stomach turn, and I grip the steering wheel tighter, focusing on keeping Paul's car in sight without getting too close. Maher asks me questions about what I saw, about how the bomb was attached and whether I noticed any wires or boxes besides the main vest. I answer as best I can, but I was too scared to look closely, and now I wish I'd paid more attention because every detail might matter. I relay the address Paul mentioned during the robbery, the words coming out clear even though my voice is shaking. 37 Elm Street, the old Victorian house where they grabbed him during a pizza delivery. Maher confirms his team is pulling up property records and tax maps, trying to understand the layout before they get there. I feel a small surge of hope that maybe planning and preparation can save Paul's life, that maybe all this professional knowledge and experience can overcome the cruelty of whoever put him in this situation. But the timer is still counting down and we're running out of time. Maher's voice comes back through the speaker, telling me to watch for spotters because the people who did this might have someone positioned along the route to make sure Paul isn't being followed. I start scanning every parked car we pass, every person standing on a corner or sitting on a bench, looking for anything that seems wrong or out of place. A guy in a gray jacket leans against a building checking his phone, and my heart jumps until he walks away in the opposite direction. A sedan with tinted windows idles at a curb, and I memorize the plate number before it pulls into traffic going the other way. Nothing looks obviously suspicious, but that somehow makes it worse because the spotters could be anyone, anywhere, watching us right now, and I'd have no way to know. Every shadow feels like a threat, and every casual pedestrian could be reporting back to whoever put that bomb on Paul. The light ahead turns yellow and I slow down, ending up 3 cars behind Paul's car at the red. I can see his shoulders through the back window and they're shaking like he's sobbing. He lifts one hand and wipes his eyes with the back of it, and something in my chest twists so hard I can barely breathe. This is so unfair it makes me want to scream into the empty car. He was just trying to make a living this morning, just delivering pizzas to pay his rent and feed his kids, and now he's driving to meet the people who are going to kill him. The light turns green and we start moving again, and I have to blink hard to clear my vision because crying won't help Paul and won't help me follow him safely. Maher asks me to describe exactly what I saw when I looked at the bomb vest, and I close my eyes for just a second to pull up the memory, even though remembering makes my stomach turn. I tell him about the wires I could see, the way the vest was strapped tight across Paul's chest with buckles that looked industrial and heavy. I describe the ligature marks on Paul's neck, the red lines that were still fresh and angry looking, like someone had tested a collar on him first to make sure he'd obey before they put the bomb on. Maher stays quiet while I talk, just making small sounds to show he's listening, and I know he's building a picture in his head for the bomb squad. Every detail I can give them might help them understand what they're dealing with, might give them some tiny advantage when they try to save Paul's life. A police car sits in a parking lot with its lights off as we pass, and I almost miss it because it's tucked behind a delivery truck. Maher confirms that's one of his unmarked units starting to shadow us from parallel streets, staying close enough to respond, but far enough that the spotters won't see them. Knowing there are other people out here helping makes the fear in my chest ease just a little bit. I'm not alone in this anymore. Paul's entire chance of survival doesn't rest only on my shoulders and my ability to keep him in sight. There's a whole team of professionals coordinating around us, moving into position, preparing to do what they're trained for. A woman's voice comes through the speaker, calm and technical, and Maher introduces her as Kavya from the bomb squad. She tells me not to call or text Paul directly under any circumstances because any radio frequency near him could trigger the device. She explains they're trying to minimize all RF exposure until they understand exactly what kind of trigger mechanism the bomb uses, and suddenly I'm aware of how many invisible signals are bouncing around us right now. Cell towers, Wi-Fi networks, radio stations, all of it filling the air with frequencies that could set off the bomb and kill Paul instantly. I hadn't even thought about that danger, and now I can't stop thinking about all the ways this could go wrong that I never considered. Maher asks me to call out any changes in Paul's route, anything that suggests he might be getting new instructions or deviating from the plan to go straight to Elm Street. I watch his turn signals like they're secret messages, looking for hesitation or unexpected lane changes, but he's driving in a straight line toward the Victorian house. He knows exactly where he's going and exactly what happens if he doesn't follow the orders they gave him. No deviation, no delay, just a man driving to his own death because he has no other choice. Maher starts briefing his team over the radio about the Victorian's layout, and I listen while he reads from tax records. 2-story house built in 1920, detached garage in the back, multiple exits and windows that give sight lines in every direction. Hearing them plan and coordinate like this gives me a fragile kind of confidence. Maybe professional training and years of experience can overcome odds that seem impossible. Maybe knowing the layout and having the right equipment will be enough to save Paul when we get there. We pass a gas station on the corner, and I notice the security cameras mounted under the awning, pointing at the pumps in the street. I mention it to Maher, thinking maybe the footage could help identify the people who did this later, after Paul is safe. He thanks me and notes the location, and I feel useful again instead of just scared. My observations matter. The things I notice could make a difference in catching whoever forced Paul into this nightmare. At the next red light, I grab my phone from the passenger seat and pull up the photo I took earlier of our training documents. The page shows the serial number range for the dye packs we keep in the drawers, and I know this information matters, even though my hands shake so badly it takes 3 tries to get a clear picture. I text it to the number Maher gave me, and he confirms he received it. Says it'll help them track the money even if the bills get destroyed or scattered. Kavya comes back on the line explaining that the bomb probably uses either a cell phone trigger or a key fob remote, something the people watching can activate from a distance. She says there are likely anti-tamper features built in that would make the vest explode if someone tries to remove it without knowing the exact sequence. She's preparing a blast blanket and something she calls a disruptor tool, but her tone makes it clear there might not be time or a safe opportunity to use any of it. We're getting close to Elm Street now, and every second that passes is 1 second closer to whatever happens next, 1 second less that Paul has left to live. A dark sedan sits under the overpass ahead, and I watch its brake lights flash twice in quick succession, then once more after a pause. The pattern feels deliberate, like someone signaling, and my stomach tightens with fresh fear. I tell Maher about it, and he asks for the plate number, but I can only give him a partial, the angle wrong for a clear view. He runs it through the readers while I keep my eyes locked on the sedan, waiting for it to move or for someone to step out, but nothing happens. Maher comes back saying nothing showed up in the system yet, and I don't know if I'm seeing actual threats or if the stress is making me imagine danger everywhere. Every parked car looks suspicious now, every pedestrian could be a lookout, and I hate not knowing what's real. Maher asks me to keep reporting anything unusual, and I promise I will, even though my definition of unusual has expanded to include basically everything. Paul takes the next turn, and I follow 3 cars back, my hands sweating on the steering wheel. Maher's voice comes through the speaker again, telling me the plate readers still haven't caught Paul's full number, which means we're missing a piece of the tracking puzzle. I close my eyes for half a second, trying to remember exactly what I saw in the bank parking lot. Then I rattle off the letters and numbers I memorized while watching him load the money bag. Maher repeats them back to confirm and puts out an alert to all units, and I feel the weight of law enforcement machinery grinding into motion around this crisis. Knowing that squad cars and detectives across the city are now watching for Paul's Honda makes me feel less alone. Less like his survival depends entirely on my ability to keep him in sight. We pass another intersection, and I can see Elm Street up ahead, the street sign visible even from here. My heart rate picks up as the Victorian house comes into view with its porch light glowing, even though the sun hasn't set yet. The house looks completely normal, just an old home with peeling paint and overgrown bushes, the kind of place you'd drive past without a second thought. I hate that something so ordinary is about to become the location where Paul might die, where a bomb might go off and destroy lives. The normalcy of it feels wrong, like tragedy should announce itself with visible darkness instead of hiding behind faded siding and a front porch swing. Kavia's voice cuts in, and she's talking to Maher about a possible jamming window, explaining they could try to block the remote signal for a brief period. But then she warns that if the people watching detect the jamming, they might have a backup trigger ready, something hardwired or on a different frequency. Every option carries deadly risk, and I realize there might only be choices between bad and worse, no clear path that guarantees Paul's safety. Maher weighs her words carefully before responding, and I can hear the burden of command in his voice, the knowledge that his decisions could save or kill someone. He starts positioning his unmarked cars along parallel streets, keeping them out of direct sight lines from the Victorians' windows. I follow his instructions to the park 2 blocks away on a side street, where I can still see Paul's car, but won't be obvious to anyone watching. My role is narrowing again to observer, and I feel helpless, wanting to do more, but knowing I've already done everything I can by getting Paul this far with backup ready. I pull into a spot between a minivan and a pickup truck, cutting my engine and slouching low in my seat. Paul's Honda is still visible ahead, and I watch him park directly in front of the Victorian house, exactly where they probably told him to stop. He sits there for a long moment with his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard I can see the tension in his shoulders, even from this distance. He's trying to gather courage, or maybe just trying to breathe, preparing himself to walk toward whatever waits inside that garage. Then he forces the car door open and climbs out with the money bag, every movement looking like it takes enormous effort. Grief and fury twist together in my chest as I watch him. Grief for what he's enduring and fury at whoever is doing this to him. Whoever thought it was acceptable to strap a bomb to a working father and send him out to die. Maher's voice comes through describing the garage sightlines to his team, noting that there's no obvious human presence visible from any of their positions. The quiet feels wrong, like the calm before something terrible breaks loose, and I hold my breath waiting for movement or sound, or any sign of what happens next. Paul stands by his car for a few seconds, the bag hanging from his shaking hand, and I want to scream at him to run, to get back in the car and drive away, even though I know he can't. Kavya mentions that according to Paul's statement, the people who did this used mannequins for testing, which means they planned everything carefully and understand exactly what the explosive yield will be. She's preparing her blast blanket and the disruptor tool, running through scenarios in her head, and I attach all my hope to her skill, because she's the expert who actually knows how to handle bombs. My faith in her competence is all I have right now, the belief that training and experience can overcome impossible odds. I scan the Victorian's front entrance and notice a small camera mounted above the door, the kind that activates with motion. I report it to Maher, immediately thinking it could hold evidence of who's been coming and going, footage that might identify the people responsible. He thanks me and makes a note for the warrant team to secure it later, and I feel like I'm contributing something useful even from 2 blocks away, where I can't physically help. Maher tells me to stay on the line as a listening post, asking me to report any pedestrians or vehicles that enter the area around the Victorian. I become his eyes on the perimeter, scanning the street constantly for anything that moves or changes. An elderly woman walks her dog on the opposite sidewalk, and I watch her until she turns the corner, making sure she's just a neighbor and not part of this nightmare. A delivery truck passes through the intersection, and I note the company name in case Maher needs it later. The task of observing gives me something concrete to focus on, besides the terror of what might happen to Paul in the next few minutes, and I grip my phone tighter, ready to call out anything suspicious the moment I see it. Paul walks toward the garage with the money bag hanging from his shaking hand. He stops at the threshold and sets it down carefully, like he's afraid it might explode if he moves too fast. He calls out something, but his voice is so quiet I can barely hear it from my car 2 blocks away. The street stays completely silent and empty. No response comes from inside the garage. No movement in the windows of the Victorian. The wrongness of it crawls under my skin and makes me want to scream. How can something this horrible be happening on a regular residential block in the middle of the afternoon? Kids probably ride bikes here. People walk their dogs. And now there's a man standing in front of a garage wearing a bomb, delivering money to people who are going to kill him anyway. Maher's voice comes through my phone speaker saying the GPS tracker is pinging from inside the garage now. The signal shows it's sitting still, not moving. He confirms the dye pack hasn't triggered yet, which means the bag is just sitting there unopened. I don't know if that's good or bad. Maybe the captors are being careful, checking for traps. Maybe they're about to spring some other trap we haven't thought of. Every possibility feels dangerous, and I grip my steering wheel harder, watching Paul stand there alone and exposed. Kavya's voice cuts in, calm but tight with stress. She says if the device is RF triggered, the next few minutes are their window to try jamming before Paul gets too far from their equipment. I can hear the tension in her voice as she thinks out loud about the risks. Trigger a backup bomb or do nothing and let the captors keep control. Both choices could kill Paul. I hate that she has to make this decision, that someone has to weigh his life against technical possibilities and hope they guess right. Maher's voice comes back authorizing limited jamming. I hear him giving quiet instructions to the EOD team, telling them to edge toward the garage corner with their equipment. Everything is happening in tiny, careful steps. Measured movements meant to lower the risk. I hold my breath and pray that being careful and knowing what they're doing will be enough to save Paul. A curtain moves in the house next door to the Victorian. Just a flutter, like someone peeking out. I report it immediately into my phone, my voice shaking. Is it just a neighbor wondering what's happening? Or is it a lookout watching to make sure Paul follows instructions? Maher tells an officer to check it out quietly. Don't knock loud, don't draw attention, just see who's there. I realize how many things are happening at once, how many ways this could go wrong that nobody can control. Too many variables, too many unknowns. Paul whispers something to himself that I can't make out from this distance. His lips move and I see him trying not to cry as he steps back from the garage like someone told him to. The image of him standing there alone, waiting to die, breaks something inside me. Tears blur my vision, and I blink them back fast because falling apart won't help him. He needs me watching. He needs me reporting what I see. I can't lose it now. Kavya's voice comes through warning that anti-tamper features could blow the bomb if they jam the wrong frequency. She starts counting down before they turn on the equipment. I hear the numbers through the speaker. 3, 2, 1. Time seems to freeze as we all wait to see if this works, or if Paul just dies right there in front of the garage. My heart hammers so hard it hurts. Nothing happens. No explosion. Paul is still standing. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Maher sends an officer to knock on the door of the neighboring house where the curtain moved. The officer walks up the steps and knocks. Waits. Knocks again. No one answers. The not knowing eats at me because we can't see inside these houses. Can't know who might be watching or what instructions they're sending to their partners. The GPS tracker shows movement now. Slight but definite. Maher reports someone is dragging the money bag deeper inside the garage, pulling it away from the door. Anger cuts through my fear sharp and hot. They're right there. Close enough to touch the money Paul risked everything to deliver. Close enough we could grab them if we didn't have to worry about the bomb killing Paul. We still can't reach them without risking his life, and that makes me want to scream. Then I see it. A faint red mist appears at the seam of the garage door. The dye pack triggered. The chemical marker is spreading through all those bills inside the bag, staining them, making them traceable and useless. It's a small bitter satisfaction knowing the money is ruined now. They can't spend it without getting caught, but it doesn't make Paul any safer. It doesn't stop the bomb strapped to his chest, and that's all I care about right now. Keeping him alive. Getting him home to his kids. Everything else is just details that matter less than his life. Maher's phone buzzes, and I see him glance at it before swiping the notification away without reading it. Later I find out it was Nell Paget from Channel 7, asking for comment on an incident in progress, and I feel something fierce and protective rise up in my chest, because this isn't a story for the evening news. This is Paul's life hanging by literal threads of wire and timing, and the idea of it becoming content for people to watch over dinner makes me want to throw my phone. Maher doesn't even pause, just keeps coordinating positions and watching Paul through whatever camera feed they have set up, and I respect him more for ignoring the media circus that's probably already forming at the perimeter. Then I hear an engine start somewhere behind the Victorian, sudden and loud enough to carry down the street. Maher's voice gets sharp and fast as he calls out that his dashcam caught a partial plate, maybe 4 characters visible before the vehicle tears out of the alley going way too fast for a residential area. He's making calls immediately, splitting his team, some staying with Paul and the bomb, while others peel off to follow the fleeing car. My stomach drops because now they're divided. Attention split between saving Paul and catching the people who did this to him, and I worry that trying to do both means failing at everything. The pursuit team radios back that they have visual on a dark sedan heading south, and I grip my phone harder, listening to the updates come through in clipped professional voices that barely hide the urgency underneath. Kavya moves forward with the blast blanket folded over her arm, and I can see her even from 2 blocks away, because she's wearing that heavy protective suit that makes her look like an astronaut. The jammer is running on low power according to what Maher tells his team, just enough to maybe interfere with remote signals without being so obvious that the captors notice and panic. I sit in my car watching through my windshield, completely useless now except as a witness to whatever happens next, and I pray harder than I've prayed since I was a kid, begging God to save my grandmother. Please let this work. Please let Kavya know what she's doing. Please let Paul go home to his kids tonight. Paul stumbles a little, and I hear his voice carry faintly across the distance, asking if he can lie down, and my heart breaks at how exhausted and terrified he sounds. Maher's response is firm, and I hate it even though I understand why. Keep your posture steady. Don't give them any reason to think something's wrong, and I realize the cruelty of making Paul stand there wearing death is necessary, because any change in his behavior might trigger the detonation. The pursuit team radios that the sedan just dumped something out the window, a bag that hit the pavement and left a red stain spreading across the fabric. They're trying to salvage some of the money, even though the dye pack ruined it, and Maher tells them to follow at a distance. Don't spook them. Don't give them any reason to detonate Paul's vest out of spite or panic. I realize we might lose the captors completely if they get away. Might never catch the people who did this, and that thought burns in my chest alongside the fear for Paul. Kavya gets close enough to examine the vest, and I hear her voice over the radio describing what she sees. Modular charges wired together in a pattern that shows real knowledge and planning, not some amateur throwing explosives together in a garage. She explains quietly to Maher that this is sophisticated work, professional-level construction, and my stomach drops at the implications because these people knew exactly what they were doing when they built this thing to kill Paul. Maher authorizes an attempt to secure a single buckle on the vest to allow partial blast blanket coverage, and I stop breathing as I listen to them coordinate the approach. Seconds feel like standing on cliff edges, every moment balanced between hope and disaster, and I grip my steering wheel so hard my knuckles turn white and my fingers start to ache. A neighbor's door opens and I see a woman step onto her porch looking toward the commotion with curiosity on her face. Maher moves fast, hand signals urgent and clear, get back inside, and she sees the bomb squad gear and freezes before backing through her door and slamming it shut. I feel rage at the casual curiosity that could pop this fragile bubble we're all trapped in, because one wrong move, one startled reaction from Paul, and the captors might detonate out of caution or malice. Kavya's team commits to the attempt, and I watch them move in choreographed silence, professionals doing impossible work under impossible pressure. They drop the partial blanket over Paul's chest, while the jammer runs and a backup team stands ready with the disruptor in case they need to cut wires fast. Everything happens without words, just hand signals and careful movements, and I realize I'm holding my breath waiting for the explosion that might come any second. Then I hear it. A muffled pop that echoes down the street and makes windows shudder in their frames. My heart stops completely as I wait to hear if Paul is alive or dead. The sound wasn't as loud as I expected, more contained somehow, and I don't know if that means the blanket worked, or if I'm about to hear the worst news of my life. Kavya's voice crackles through the speaker, and I hear her calling out that Paul is conscious but bleeding. The blast went directional into the blanket like they hoped. Relief hits me so hard my hands start shaking on the steering wheel, and I have to grip it tighter to stop the trembling. But then the word bleeding catches up to my brain, and the relief turns into something sick and twisted because he's alive but hurt, saved but broken, and I don't know how to feel about that complicated mix of good and bad. Maher starts giving orders immediately, and I hear him telling EMS to move forward while his team still can't safely enter the garage where the money got dropped because they don't know if there are more traps or devices waiting. Someone reports over the radio that the alley car escaped after ditching the stained bag, and my stomach drops because the people who did this to Paul are gone, disappeared into the city, and we saved Paul but lost the chance to catch them. I pull out my phone with fingers that won't stop shaking and text Chloe with just 2 words. He's alive. And her response comes back in seconds saying the whole bank lobby is still shaking from stress and everyone is crying. Our shared fear connects us across the distance, and I realize this thing that happened is going to stay with all of us for a long time. All of us changed by what we saw and felt today. Kavya's voice comes through again, explaining something technical to Maher about how someone probably tried to trigger the device during the jamming window, but the backup charge fired anyway. A second system built in to kill Paul even if the main trigger failed. The thought of that level of planning makes me feel sick, because whoever built this thing wanted Paul dead. So badly they made sure it would happen, even if something went wrong with their remote, and I'm amazed that Kavya had the guts to approach something built with that kind of mean smartness. Maher's team retrieves the stained bag from the alley and confirms over the radio that the bills are ruined by dye, but the serial numbers are still readable and traceable. It's not the money we wanted, but it's proof, evidence that might lead to arrests, even though the bad guys got away today, and I hold on to that small hope because it's all I have right now. Maher walks over to my car and asks me to give my first official statement right there by the curb. And I start talking with a voice that sounds steady at first, but then begins shaking as the rush of energy drains out of my system all at once. He thanks me for the tracker idea and for keeping visual contact with Paul, tells me I probably saved Paul's life by doing what I did, and suddenly I'm crying so hard I can barely breathe because the weight of everything I did finally crashes down on me. My phone buzzes with a voicemail from Nell Paget asking for my comment on the incident, but I don't call her back because this isn't my story to tell. It's Paul's story, and he deserves to control what people know about what happened to him. I feel protective of his privacy and his right to tell things his own way, refusing to let this become some exciting story for people to read about and forget. That evening, I end up at the hospital because Maher asks me to come give another statement, and I see Paul being wheeled past on a gurney with his hand wrapped up in thick white bandages from the blast. He sees me standing there in the hallway and nods just once, a small movement of his head. And in that moment, without any words, we both understand that trying mattered, that choosing to act was better than doing nothing, even though everything went wrong and messy. The next day, Maher calls to update me that they identified one possible person involved through the alley car's license plate, traced back to a rental paid for with a burner credit card, but no arrests have been made yet. I feel restless and mad that justice is moving so slowly when I want these people caught right now. But I also get that building a case that will actually stick takes time and careful work, and I want them caught the right way so they can't hurt anyone else the way they hurt Paul. Kavya stops by my house later that same day to explain privately why they couldn't risk trying to fully remove the vest, telling me that the backup trigger system meant any attempt to take it off completely would have killed Paul right away. She thanks me for the tracker idea and says it gave them the time and positioning they needed to even attempt what they did. And hearing that validation from her means everything to me because she's the real expert who actually saved his life while I just followed my gut and got lucky. 2 days later, Mac Vernon from corporate shows up at the bank wearing an expensive suit and calls all of us who were there during the robbery into the conference room. He stands at the head of the table with his arms crossed and tells us we're not allowed to talk to any reporters or police investigators without company lawyers present. I feel my jaw tighten because that's not right. That's not fair to Paul, who deserves people telling the truth about what happened to him. I speak up and say Paul was a victim. He was forced to do this, and people need to know that instead of thinking he was some kind of criminal. Mac Vernon's face gets red and he starts explaining about liability and the bank's reputation, but Steve cuts him off and backs me up. Steve says the staff did everything right and Paul Torres deserves our support, not our silence, and I feel surprised and grateful that he's standing up to corporate. Mac Vernon looks annoyed, but he backs down a little and says, "We can talk to investigators but still need to be careful with media," and I take that as a small win because at least we're not being completely silenced. The next morning, I see Nell's article online, and my stomach twists with worry about how she told the story. But as I read it, I feel relief wash over me because she focused on how Paul was forced into this, how he was a working dad just trying to make ends meet who got grabbed during a pizza delivery. She wrote about the people who did this to him and how they targeted someone vulnerable, someone who couldn't fight back, and she didn't make it sound exciting or dramatic. She told it like it was sad and wrong and human, and I'm grateful she chose dignity over clicks. I still worry about Paul's family dealing with attention from this, about his kids reading things online about their dad, but at least Nell gave them a fair story to point to. That evening, Wilder comes home from work, and we try to have dinner like normal, but it falls apart fast. He tells me he's been angry for days about what I did, about how I could have died following Paul, and I get defensive immediately. I say I had to do something. I couldn't just let Paul walk out there alone, and Wilder says I could have let the professionals handle it. We go in circles for 20 minutes, me saying I made the right choice and him saying I scared him, both of us getting louder until we're not even listening to each other anymore. Then I start crying because I'm exhausted and scared too, and he starts crying because he thought he was going to lose me. We sit there on the couch crying together, and finally Wilder says we need help processing this. We need counseling because we can't let what happened destroy what we have. I agree, and we hold each other, and I feel hopeful that we can work through this, instead of letting trauma and fear tear us apart. 1 week after everything happened, Maher calls me and says they arrested someone. He explains they found dye-stained fingerprints on the bag that got dumped in the alley, prints that matched someone in the system, and they picked him up that morning. I ask if they got everyone, and he says no, probably not. This is just one person, and there were at least 2 or 3 others involved. I feel satisfied, but also sad because I know some of the people who did this to Paul might never get caught. Maher tells me justice doesn't always look like we want it to. Sometimes we have to accept that we got some of them, and that has to be enough. I thank him for calling and tell him I hope they find the others. But I'm also making peace with the fact that the world doesn't always give us complete answers or perfect endings. A few days later, I drive to Paul's house because I want to see how he's doing. He answers the door, and his right hand is wrapped in thick white bandages, the one that got hurt when the bomb went off. We sit in his kitchen and he tries to pour coffee, but he can't grip the pot right with his damaged hand, and I watch him figure out how to use his left hand instead. He asks me about my wedding plans and seems genuinely interested, wanting to know about the venue and the date, and there's something gentle in the conversation. It's awkward because we don't really know each other outside of the worst day of both our lives, but it's also hopeful in a weird way. We're two people who survived something terrible together, and now we're sitting here talking about normal things like weddings and coffee, and that feels important somehow. 3 weeks after the robbery, I walk back into the bank and sit down at my same desk. The silent alarm button is still under my palm, and I think about how I could have run from this job, could have found work somewhere else where I wouldn't have to think about bombs and timers every day. But I chose to stay because running felt like letting fear win. I also pushed hard for better training on active threat situations, and the bank agreed to bring in experts to teach us new protocols. It feels good turning my fear into something useful, something that might help other people if this ever happens again. Steve pulls me aside later that week and tells me corporate-approved trauma counseling for everyone who was there during the robbery. He admits he's been going to sessions himself and they're helping him process everything. We talk honestly about how scared we all were, how we're all still dealing with it in different ways, and the conversation creates a bond between us that years of regular work never did. There's something about surviving trauma together that connects people deeper than normal relationships. Wilder and I start couples counseling the following week, and I also begin seeing a therapist on my own. We work through the complicated feelings about my choice to follow Paul and his fear of losing me. The counselor helps us understand that we both have valid needs, that I need to act according to my values, and he needs to feel secure in our relationship. We're learning how to honor both those things instead of fighting about whose feelings matter more. It's hard work, and sometimes the sessions leave us exhausted, but I feel like we're building something stronger and more honest than what we had before. I'm genuinely hopeful about our future together now, in a way I wasn't sure I could be right after everything happened.